Well, I think there's well-documented cases that these corporations and in these free trade zones there's massive human rights abuses from, for instance, there was a woman here from Colombia recently who works in the flower industry, and she was saying that still today the practice of forced sterilization among women is very common. They're not allowed to use bathrooms oftentimes, forced to work under really strenuous conditions, standing on their feet for up to 20 hours, also in really extreme conditions of either heat or cold.
Back in, I think it was 2002, a Gap factory closed in El Salvador because the workers there decided to organize. And it was same conditions, sweatshop conditions there. And when the workers started to organize, the Gap factory just said, you know what, we'll just close our doors, shut down, and you guys can find work elsewhere. It's not the jobs that are the problem, it's just the conditions that they're working under. People want jobs. You ask anybody in most developing countries, in the United States, do you want a job? Yes, I want a job. Will you be willing to work somewhere if we open this factory? Yes, I'll be willing to work. But it's still quite unfair to say that they should have to work under near slave conditions or sweatshop conditions. So,
well, what's going on right now and why sweatshop conditions prevail is because brands demand prices from the factories that can only be met with sweatshop conditions. So it's like not paying overtime, not having fire extinguishers, not having ventilation, having wages that you can't live on very well. You'd have to work long hours to be able to do basic things like feed, clothe, and housing, let alone cover medical expenses or invest in education. A lot of times what happens is a worker gets injured, they have to work more to pay for the medical treatments than take time off to properly heal.
Corporations are getting sneakier, they're more strategic. They are very well aware that they have to maintain their image and their logo as being sort of free of sweatshop. I'm not a sweatshop corporation, where Target doesn't want to be a Walmart right now. Target's very much the same as Walmart, and unfortunately people hate to hear that too, because everybody knows how bad Walmart's been. And, it had its Kathy Lee sweatshops back in the 90s, and it continues in today. It means we need to also step up and increase our strategic way of thinking, and how can we better hold the corporations accountable for what they're doing and how they're treating their workers, and not let them get away with, creating this race to the bottom for the lowest wage and the worst job.
Entonces, pues la única salida que les queda para sobrevivir es emigrar, porque se comienzan a violar sus derechos, su derecho a la educación, su derecho al trabajo, su derecho a la vivienda, su derecho a la salud, su derecho a la igualdad, al desarrollo, a la recreación, a un ambiente sano. Entonces, ante toda esa serie de violaciones a los derechos humanos, la gente se tiene que venir. Y entonces empieza otra historia de violación también a sus derechos.
We definitely have a global society now. There's nothing someone can do in Nicaragua that's not going to eventually impact us here. Then we have a responsibility to change this system that we really benefit from the exploitation of other people. And I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think there has been progress, but there's a long way to go.
According to a price study released in late 2005, early 2006, total retail price associated with labor is 1% to 3%. So for a $32 shirt, if you wanted to double the wages of all the workers producing that shirt, that $32 shirt would cost $32.90. And that's if me buying the shirt at the store pays that extra 90 cents, that contributes to the doubling of wages for workers producing clothing in the developing world. What's going on right now with garment prices is often the price fluctuates beyond that 90 cents anyway from year to year. So students would see the prices go up like they always do from year to year, but this time it would be for a reason besides lining the pockets of Nike.
these sort of policy agreements set the stage for all sorts of human rights abuses, you know, and they validate the corporations over the well-being of the people that work there, you know, and they encourage the movement of capital and goods and not the movement of people, which I always think is pretty interesting in this day when immigration is a very hot topic, that these corporations and businesses, they can go wherever they want and they can exploit whatever they want. And then when they've destroyed a community and the people have nothing left to do but leave where they're from to try to make any sort of money, then we criminalize these people for doing that, as opposed to criminalizing the corporations that go in there in the first place and just ravage these countries. So I think it's sort of, there's a term in Spanish that's called this patas arriba, which means like upside down world. Like the world is backwards. Like instead of criminalizing immigrants who've crossed over the border, that really the people who should be criminalized are these CEOs who are making billions of dollars off the exploitation of workers in Central and South America.
Consumers should be very concerned about where their products are coming from and how they're being made. And not just that, but like how are those, you know, do you want to be, you know, wearing shoes that you were known were made by someone who's working under slave-like conditions, you know? Is that something that we want to be, oh, I'm going to go to the store and buy some slave shoes, you know?
Children are producing a great majority of the shoes that we wear and the clothes that we wear, you know? And children are even more easy to exploit, you know? I mean, I think, you know, in the scale that they're not going to know their rights. You know, most of us don't even know our rights, but there's less likely that a child will know their rights, and they're easier to manipulate and control. And from the company's perspective in these zones, that they're disposable, you know, so they can use them and they'll get more out of them because they're little, and then it's not really their concern, like their development as people or the society.
Bueno, es importante luchar por la defensa de los derechos humanos porque cualquier injusticia cometida contra cualquier persona en cualquier parte del mundo es una ofensa a la misma humanidad. Yo creo que no podemos seguir repitiendo los errores que los humanos han cometido en la historia. La historia debe servirnos para aprender, no para equivocarnos con los mismos errores, con los mismos tropiezos que antiguamente otros cometieron.
Even though there have been slight improvements in free trade zones, or at least more people are conscious of where their products are coming from, on a global level, the majority of people are still exploited for the benefit of a few.
We don't need to use sweatshops to produce our clothes. We can still use the factories, but the factories can be a source of livelihoods for developing countries rather than a point of exploitation.
But I think one of the main points of this is education, because I like to believe that most people, if they knew that their shirt came at the cost of, you know, a small child working for 18 hours a day and not having bathroom breaks, that they would make another decision, you know. But I think because of the distance and the separation, you know, people don't realize.